It's God's will. Have you ever said this or heard it in response to something dreadful that happened in someone's life? Well, welcome to Calm in the Chaos, where we believe God is within us and around us, and we are co-creators of the world we live in by the decisions we make. Laying events at the feet of God and saying it's God's will divests us of responsibility for how things are. Now, granted, there are a lot of things that are not my responsibility, not in my control. I cannot control a cloudless evening for our equinox gathering. I cannot choose what day my dad will die. We are not in charge of much, but I can decide to respect you and to value this incredible life source called planet Earth. More and more of us are finding God in nature. We are finding that that's how we relate to the divine. A 2015 Baylor University study discovered that places with, and I quote, more beautiful weather and scenery have lower rates of membership and affiliation with religious organizations, unquote. I have met many people who have fallen away from mainstream organized religion and are finding a closer relationship with the divine and more connection to one another through a deeper appreciation of animals, plants, galaxies, and the natural elements of water, air, fire, and earth. Many are finding deeper meaning by spending more time communing with nature than by sitting in a pew. If you haven't read the little volume called Earth, Our Original Monastery, please do. Or read it one chapter at a time with me on Wednesday evenings beginning September 27th. You can attend live or Zoom it in. I thought a lot this week about what lessons we learned from the great global shutdown. How we marveled at the clear skies over big cities, and yet how we yearned for getting back to normal, which includes using our cars far too much. How we got closer to the food we ate, baking bread, making soups, and we knew that the supermarket shelves could indeed be empty. Yet some of us returned to boxes and cans of food, and we let someone else bake our bread when things opened up. Did we learn to walk barefoot in the grass? Did we learn to not take friends for granted? I sincerely hope that you have carried over some of the lessons and made your new normal better than before. During that period of time, that same period, we learned more about the roles of police officers, about Black and brown people's lives, and about person-to-person abuse. I want those lessons to continue to live in my heart as I strive to learn even more about my human sisters and brothers. I hope that somehow this learning finds a Velcro spot in my soul and hangs on so that bits of wisdom might develop around these tiny gems of learning. To whom do we turn for wisdom these days? For wisdom. Some, I believe, turn to a book, a Bible, a Quran. Some turn to God that they know. Some turn to one another. Since I believe that each of us is a divine spark, I believe that we're each endowed with wisdom in our DNA. Wisdom that we've covered over by intellectualizing, much as a large rock can be hidden by vines and overgrown by mosses. Our wisdom goes far back to humans' cave days, and we can access it if we can only quiet the world noise long enough to hear it. I'm heading out to sit in the breezeway. I'll take the pups with me, but no book. I just want to hear the voice that is blowing in the breeze. I want to listen for the wisdom of the wrens and the yellow thrushes. I want to smell the wisdom of the new-mown grass and see the wisdom of the swaying branches of the white pine trees. I'll close today with a story by Jan Phillips. She's a theologian and a wise woman. She wrote it in 2020, forever known as the pandemic year. You may want to close your eyes and just listen and drink it in. It's called When God Gave Up on Humans. It came to pass in the 21st century that God gave up on the human race. He scrawled his message across the sky in words that were understood by every tribe and nation. It said, "You are on your own. In 20 centuries you have failed to love each other. You use me as a reason to hate and kill. You endanger your children. You poison your planet. I'm done with you. You'll have to find me in each other from now on." The people on earth wept and worried. What will become of us, they wondered. Who will we run to? Who will provide for us? How will I find my car keys? They asked all these things, throwing their arms up in despair. Over the years, even the adults had become like children in their notions of God. While every holy book encouraged them to find God in themselves and each other, they insisted on keeping God up in the heavens. They made God responsible for everything, saying, God did this and God did that. As long as God was the Heavenly Father, they could act like children, and they did. Even when great teachers came to tell them they were one with God, they were the hands and arms and legs of God. They were the breath of God. They would not grow up. For growing up would mean they would have to change their ways, and they did not want to. When the Sky Bulletin came, people flocked to the churches and the temples to see what to do, but no one there had an answer, for they too had kept God high up in the cloud. Referring to God as up there or out there. It was God who made miracles, they preached, God who made the rules, God who punished, God who gave men all the power. They too were like children and were lost without God. Years passed, seasons changed, and life on earth changed dramatically when God left the people on earth. There was a great sadness, except for the few who claimed they had felt all along that God dwelt within them. Those people had no sadness, and in fact, quite the opposite occurred. They were secretly relieved that the people stopped calling out God's name for their reasons to hate and hurt others. Once God disappeared, people stopped fighting over what God meant in the Bible or the Quran. There was no point in fighting over God if God wasn't around. If there was no God, there was nobody condemning anyone's behavior, no more infidels, no reason to take an eye for an eye. People stopped seeking out priests and caliphs and rabbis and ministers, for there was no God for them to mediate. They sought out instead the people who were joyful and calm in this time of abandonment, thinking they must know something special and secret to be so happy. One such person was a woman who sat under a tree in a village. "How can you be so happy when God has left us?" a villager asked her. "Only that God who was far away has left," she answered. "The spark inside still remains. It is our breath. That to me is God. It's the love within. If I'm breathing, I am being breathed by God. For that I am joyful, for I am not alone." A soldier came to the woman and put down his gun and sat beside her. "I've been a patriot, I've gone to war for God and for my country. I do not understand why God has left me. I don't know what to do." She smiled and took his hand. "Those ideas in your head you have learned from someone else. Have you learned to listen to the voice within?" "I do not know what the voice inside me has to say," he said. "Then you must sit with someone and tell your story, for only then will you hear it. And when you are done with your story, listen to the story of the one who heard you. Be real when you speak and be ready when you listen, for it is in that conversation that you will find the answer for your next move." The wise woman under the tree counseled people throughout the day, as did all the wise women in towns and villages around the world. They addressed the people's fears of living without God and reminded everyone that God lived right inside them. Over and over they held the hands of fearful people, saying, "An old myth is dying, but a new one is being born." They helped people grow up with a view of the Holy One deep within. They passed on secrets about finding the sacred in the sap of a maple, the flow of a river, the majesty of a mountain, and the people in time grew reverent toward the earth. They stopped asking questions like, "What is your religion?" or "Have you been saved?" For everyone knew the other was holy and a spark of that flame they once called God. People learned to share their stories, to listen to their hearts, and to help one another. They changed their ways, replenished the soil, cleaned the waters, harnessed the powers of wind and sun. Over time, the people grew up and saw the light. Wars stopped as Allah, God, was welcomed home in the hearts of the people. Once they found God in themselves and each other, the people rejoiced and were glad. They were free at last, bowing in joy to the earth and to all creatures. Blessings on all.